Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled, What Every Healthcare CIO Needs to Know About Networking. My name is Mark Haglund, and I'm Editor-in-Chief of Healthcare Innovation. Today's program is sponsored by Extreme Networks. Thank you so much to our sponsor and to our audience for giving us your time and attention today. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping details to share with you. To submit a question, please use the Q&A box to the left of your video window at any time. You do not have to wait until the end of the program. For technical issues, please press F5 to refresh. And if that doesn't work, you can submit a question with your issue through the Q&A panel. Finally, join our webinar conversation on Twitter. You can tweet using the hashtag HILiveWebinar. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's program, Matt McNeil and Camille Campbell. Matt is Senior Sales Director for the U.S. Healthcare Team at Extreme Networks, with healthcare networking experience spanning a few decades at Avaya and now Extreme Networks. Camille Campbell, Senior Manager, Product Marketing, is Product Marketing Manager at Extreme Networks. She is responsible for Extreme's secure automated campus architecture with a specific focus on fabric networking and IoT. Camille has over 15 years of experience working at a number of different organizations with focuses on both enterprise and service provider, and has held a variety of sales and marketing roles throughout her career. It's my pleasure to welcome Matt and Camille. Matt and Camille, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Pleasure to be here and great to help sponsor this event today. And I want to echo Mark's thanks for attendance. And let's dive into it, folks. Really appreciate your time here. So today's agenda, we're going to look at basically two things to kind of get started, trends and issues, which will be just high level. We're going to really focus on four trends and issues that are relevant for CIOs. And the five things we're going to cover in today's agenda, we're going to investigate funding, we're going to look at the cloud strategy, and we're going to look how we can help continue to support the digital business initiatives as far as network transformation. Then always security, right? Security, 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 more than ever under the pandemic is even more scrutinized. Then lastly, we'll just kind of wrap it up with how Extreme Networks is here to help. So quick agenda, we'll dive into it right now. All right, so obviously we understand there's a pandemic. There's been furloughs. There's been, hey, I'm not going back to my office, right? My employees are working remotely. I have to, work with vendor management now, scrutinize to get into the building, or delays in buildings. My projects have been delayed. There's funding issues. So we really wanted to kind of focus on four things, as I mentioned earlier, that there's some of the initiatives and trends that we'll focus on for this event. But obviously, we acknowledge that virtual health is here to stay. We still know that Netflix sometimes is just as important as the EMR application when I've got patient guests and attending a healthcare facility. But we really want to work on the funding. How can I get funds? Because we get, hey, I need money. I need appropriations to continue funding. I need to look at the culture, right? And that culture is changing, right? AI, ML, cloud informatics. How can I better leverage this? And I've got the continuous, hey, my project is delayed. How can I get in front of the business, right? How can Biomed is always coming to me for these different kind of applications and needs. How can I get in front of them to meet their demands? So these are some of the things that we're going to focus on, and keep in mind that we're going to focus on the quadruple aim of healthcare as far as we handle solutions moving forward, all right? So let's focus on, number one, investigate and leverage federal funding or government-owned funding with USAC, and look at those things. And what I'd like to say is we are working with a company called FG. FG is a top 3 USAC funding provider for healthcare. Has over 15 years experience in helping healthcare organizations such as yours get connectivity help and working with the World Health Connect Fund in the past. So we are proud to partner with them and really look at what's out there, right? With the CARES Act, we had the telehealth program, but there's also, I think, an education gap in regards to network funding and budgetary help with the Healthcare Connect Fund. So we're going to review it just for a second. The Healthcare Connect Fund is here to support rural and also urban facilities. It will give 65% back on connections, and then depending on how you file, it could also include equipment and services. So it is a big, and this is annualized, folks. So these are annual funds that come into play as far as the Healthcare Connect Fund. If you're familiar with E-rate for schools and libraries and other funding arms, this all comes from the Universal Services Fund that we pay on our cell phones and telephone bills every month. And this is to help, promote communications in healthcare and across K-12 and libraries. So the big thing about Healthcare Connect Fund is, number one, are you a nonprofit healthcare provider? And if you are, you're likely eligible to receive services. And the majority of acute care healthcare systems in the U.S. are nonprofit. So with that, most are eligible. Now here's kind of the kicker. Most feel that this is still deemed a rural healthcare fund only, but urban organizations such as in New York City, Philly, Charlotte, to name a few, are now filing and working with consortiums to help qualify for increased support. And this is very important to know because it also it can include you to include different network services and appropriations that work with it. And FG can help, FG and Extreme can help, organize that consortium with you that's one is existing or work with one in your area. This is just a listing of some of the eligible expenses: the telecommunication services, the broadband networks, the facilities, and again, as I said earlier, it funds up to 65% annualized. So this is recurring annual funding that can become available to yourself. FG has done a great job. Like I said, 15 years experience. They have their own proprietary funding model working with USAC, and this is just an example of an organization that is able to see they have $865,000 potentially of funding available. The nice thing about this too, it does not include current data center infrastructure or admin locations. So typically what happens is another 10 to 20% increase of funding. So this probably projection of those 15 sites will now include, let's say, 17 or 18, and likely to be over $1 million annualized in funding that they're not taking advantage of. So just once you make your aware of this, then obviously you can reach out to myself to get in connection with FG as far as a funding example. There is time sensitive, and that's why I want to mention this first on the webinar. Right now they're going through appropriations and doing site registrations through October. And again, this can be done every year as far as the process for this $800 million, which was raised this year, but we need to act now. And then it kind of walks you through the time frame of the RFP requests and funding requests and disbursements in February through October of next year. So time is key here as far as the funding, but obviously it can make a big impact as far as projects and analysis that need to develop for your organization. All right, with that, I'm going to take a pause here and pass it over to Camille and kind of really focus on the business culture and cloud. So thanks, Camille, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So let's jump right into cloud. And I wanted to start with some of the recommendations that Gartner has around the importance of developing a robust cloud strategy so that your organizations are really able to keep pace with some of the digital care initiatives. And according to Gartner, one of the biggest challenges around cloud is that ad hoc purchasing practices are really prevalent, and it makes it very difficult to achieve centralized decision-making and governance over all of these different clouds. The ad hoc purchasing, of course, is coming from pressure from the business to support new cloud-native applications, and you guys know this is accelerating more than ever with more and more individuals working from home. And then some of the other challenges with regards to cloud refer to the legacy infrastructure that's in place, which can kind of complicate this transition. And also the mindset around the shift from CapEx to OpEx when you transition more to a subscription-based pricing model. And here, really what we're showing is some of the complexity that can occur when individual point solutions are purchased ad hoc. And basically, you get a patchwork of disparate services, which can increase IT complexity, particularly regarding root cause analysis. So the key recommendation and the point Gartner is really trying to make is it's really important to take a step back and develop a cloud strategy that supports and is in alignment to some of the long-term business strategies. And once that cloud strategy has been defined and bought into by the organization, it can then guide the IT organization to build a well-defined cloud operating plan. So one thing that is very important to consider when you're developing your cloud strategy is infrastructure management. And in healthcare, many applications, some electronic health records, some contact center applications have already migrated to the cloud. And one service that's really on the horizon is infrastructure management. And just to define what this means, it's basically managing your network via a cloud management portal that you log into. So you still own, control, manage, and operate your equipment. You're just logging into a cloud portal to do it. The reason why it needs to be considered is that cloud-managed networking is actually growing 9 times faster than traditional networking. And this is because the cloud can offer so many things to the network. It can really automate the onboarding process and enable a lot of remote management capabilities, which of course is super important in the current environment we're in. It also offers a simple single pane of glass view of the network through a very user-friendly and intuitive interface. And then probably the most compelling reason is all the AI ML-driven insights that really provide the ability to fine-tune the network before anything becomes service impacting. The other thing to point out is cloud-based infrastructure management did originate in the Wi-Fi space, but it's not only for Wi-Fi anymore. And at Extreme, we've been integrating our end-to-end portfolio into our cloud management system. And then finally, the last thing to point out is that the technology is advancing. And at Extreme, for example, we're currently on a 4th-generation cloud infrastructure that really designs in a lot of resiliency, a lot of availability, and security. So it's really now suited to meet the demands of healthcare. So in terms of what to look for in a cloud infrastructure management platform, availability is so important and so critical. And ensuring that any loss of connectivity to the public cloud or the subscription service expiring is not going to impact any of the network traffic or any of the underlying infrastructure. And of course, it's important to really look into the cloud-based architecture to make sure they're using the latest and greatest data center design practices, and they're building a highly resilient, highly available cloud. You also need to ensure extremely high data durability, and with Extreme's cloud, we store over 1 million bits of data about the operation of the network per day without loss. You also want to look for a solution that offers unlimited data retention for the length of your subscription. The industry standard is only 30 days, but unlimited data provides live and historical insights over a longer period of time to be able to pinpoint month-to-month or year-to-year network trends. So, for example, the growth in Netflix by patients, for example. And then security. So in the past, there's been many concerns about the security of the public cloud. However, the top public cloud vendors, AWS, Google, Microsoft Azure, they've literally spent billions on security and have massive teams of cybersecurity experts and data scientists. But over and above that, you should definitely look into a cloud platform that offers some of the very stringent certifications, such as ISO 27001, and something that can support, things like GDPR and CCPA regulations. The other thing that's important to look for is a cloud platform that offers some deployment flexibility and simplicity. So being public cloud agnostic is something to look for. Many healthcare companies leverage the Microsoft Azure cloud. So having an infrastructure management solution that isn't just tied to AWS cloud, for example, and can be hosted in Azure or Google is a huge benefit. And then being deployment agnostic is key. So if your organization isn't quite ready for a public cloud deployment, being able to deploy infrastructure management solution in a private cloud environment or even locally on-premise is key. And then licensing. So some cloud management offers are associated with a very complicated licensing structure. So you really want to look for something that's simple. And Extreme offers one license fee for any device, whether it's a switch, router, or AP. And the licenses are also portable. So you can move a license from one AP to another, or from a switch to an AP very, very easily. And Matt, I know you've had some experiences with some of your healthcare customers and managing this transition and managing subscriptions and licenses.
Yeah, it's as we know, going from a CapEx model to an OpEx model is not the easiest conversation with CFOs as a CIO. So I want to just point out we're here to help. And we're able to transition licensing requirements. We don't have a whole, like some of our competition, we don't have to introduce our licensing person that just focuses on licensing. As Camille mentioned, a single easy license can be portable for private, public, but there's also that permanent to subscription license conversations that we engage in as well to plan around that. So when you're ready for cloud, the appropriate licensing and structure and cost structure is available as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. So another reason companies really are intrigued by cloud management is all the data and insights that can be gained through AI and ML. And this isn't only in the form of IT intelligence, but also in the form of business intelligence. One thing to do keep in mind, however, is the level of intelligence that you can gain is highly dependent on the underlying data. And large data pools really allow the network to learn and ultimately become more intelligent. Extreme's Cloud has a massive data pool managing over 1 million devices and analyzing over 6 petabytes of data with its rich AI/ML capability. And then it boils all of this information up into very highly intuitive dashboards that can really provide a quick at-a-glance view of the health of your network as well as the health of each and every connected device. Asset tracking is also something that is critical when you're looking at a healthcare environment. And a study conducted by Gartner estimates that 10 to 20% of a hospital's inventory actually goes missing or is misplaced every year. So being able to track the location of valuable medical devices and other IoT devices is critical in improving productivity and efficiency of the hospital staff. And you can see the various ways we collect these insights through our cloud management platform. And then finally, cloud managed networking is something that might be a new addition to your overall cloud strategy. And Extreme can help with the cloud-based infrastructure management and give you a path to evolve there at your own pace. We are currently the fastest growing cloud managed network vendor in terms of revenue, and we also hold the #2 position in terms of market share. So this is a space we do have considerable experience with. And with that, I wanted to transition and speak to how you can support some of your digital business transformation initiatives by looking at a next generation network infrastructure. And digital transformation, you guys know, has really been kicked into overdrive as a result of this pandemic. And as all this digital technology gets adopted, we can't forget about the network because it's the foundation for all of this technology to work in the way it should. So in the same way, the cloud is an important part of digital transformation and an important component, as we just talked about, of next generation infrastructure management. That underlying network, the switches, the routers, the APs, are also an important component. And while the old mentality used to be the network was nothing but a cost center, as we embrace these advanced digital technologies, we really need to look at the network differently. And I love this quote from one of our healthcare customers about the network not just needing to enable IT anymore. It's really about enabling business results, especially improving the patient experience and health outcomes. The challenge is many of the networks and their architectures haven't fundamentally changed over the past 30 years. From an IT perspective, on the compute environment, we've seen huge modernization, but we really haven't seen the same evolution on the networking side. We basically leveraged the same designs, same architectures, and same technologies or protocols. And these networks were built for a totally different era, an era when applications were tied to physical servers and users worked from their desks. We didn't have the very dynamic environment where your patients, your staff, your applications, and your devices are all mobile. And it's this dynamic and mobile environment that's really creating complexity, because our traditional networks are static environments that are difficult to change, requiring careful planning and off-hours maintenance windows. Many networking teams still do things in the CLI and have to configure hop by hop to extend a new network service from end to end. And there's also a lack of insights into the network. Troubleshooting what, where, why there's a connectivity issue can sometimes be like finding a needle in a haystack. So if we start looking at the network as a strategic asset, we need to look at more modern approaches to building networks. We really need to bring the network up to date to all the advanced technology it's expected to support. So what would the attributes be of a modern day network? First and foremost, it needs to be simple, it needs to be fast, and it needs to be secure. And more now than ever, we really need to deliver automation to the network. This is not only going to free up cycles for your networking IT resources, it can also help enable an ROI to justify the much-needed investment into the network. And fabric networking is the technology that can deliver on this. And, without getting into some of the technical details on what it is, it really is just a simpler way to manage, deploy, and operate the network. It really modernizes the network and makes it more agile and flexible, so it can be that resilient and secure foundation for digital transformation. Our fabric network also needs more advanced management capabilities, and that's where the cloud management capabilities that we talked about earlier really comes in, providing the single pane of glass management, as well as that in-depth view of all the connected devices, the applications, and the overall health of the network. So, if we look at today, we know that in an IT environment, it's always the network that's the bottleneck. Maintenance windows, long planning cycles to implement network changes make it hard for networking teams to be responsive to the business. But the right infrastructure, the right fabric network can really eliminate these delays and enable faster service delivery by eliminating touch points from the network. So what I mean by that is Extreme's fabric network enables network services to be provisioned at the source and destination edges only. The network then dynamically establishes the shortest path to interconnect everything. What this means, you're never having to reconfigure core and aggregation switches. They're built once and then they're pretty much hands off. So this contributes to overall better network stability. And then you're able to extend connectivity fast because it's only 2 touch points to extend a service. And you can see the very tangible example from one of our customers in London, where they went from configuring 36 uplinks on 17 different devices to basically provisioning 2 edge ports, and they're done. So a dramatic simplicity of the network. The other piece of the network is we really need to enable secure onboarding of clients and IoT devices in a way that doesn't burden network IT teams. So Matt talked about the biomed team. So, if the biomed team comes up and says they want 50 new medical devices connected to the network by tomorrow, you can do it. It's not a problem. And the right fabric infrastructure can make the network a lot more plug and play than it is today. You can essentially have the wired network behave more like a wireless network where clients can connect and disconnect seamlessly. And with Extreme's Fabric solution, when a device is unplugged from a port and plugged into a new one, what you have is a network connectivity retracts from the old port. All of the residual configuration is cleaned up, and then that service extends dynamically to the new port. And we're doing this through dynamic auto attach features that really automates the network edges by enabling this zero-touch user, device, and virtual machine attachment to the network. In addition to accelerating time to service through a more plug-and-play network environment, we can also automate other pieces of the network. You can look for something that enables zero-touch onboarding, where you're essentially just plugging a switch into the network. It calls home to a management system. It registers, it downloads its predefined templates, and it's up and running. In parallel, you can look for dynamic provisioning of the infrastructure. And with Extreme, a new switch can detect it's part of an existing fabric and automatically configure itself to join that fabric without any manual intervention. And in addition, if we plug an AP into a new switch, it will detect this AP and dynamically configure the connection between the AP and the switch. So essentially what we're doing is we're automating as much as we can when it comes to the network, because this has an impact on the bottom line. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to talk about some of the results we've seen.
Yeah, thanks, Camille. So a year ago, we worked with the Enterprise Strategy Group, ESG, to take a look at a healthcare facility organization and get some cost analysis as far as OPEX and CAPEX, but really take that secure automation, simplicity, right? And how does it mean as far as dollars? And what they found was about, on average, 26% lower cost for hardware and software, even more for maintenance and professional services. And I just want to mention, Camille, we've actually did that. We've worked with over 100 hospitals conversions to Extreme over the last 10 years, we'll call it, with myself personally. And we actually see up to 60% of that maintenance, professional services. So that is giving you obviously money back for projects, timelines, and getting your infrastructure ahead of the business. So it's been a huge impact to our customers as far as cost performance, OPEX-wise, and being able to, what I'll call, a quote from one of our clients, hey, I can now use a junior engineer to set up new services for biomed at Thursday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when I used to have to wait 2 weeks or once a month for change control, get all the signatures off, and do it at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. So it's a big impact as far as time savings and support of the staff support into the networks as well. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's very compelling. Oops, I think I jumped ahead a little quickly there. So security is another major trend, and if you look at some of the numbers, the unfortunate reality is that healthcare organizations are often targets for malicious actors. And you can see the bar graph on the slide, and it shows that the number of healthcare data breaches impacting 500 or more records jumped significantly in 2019. And then, as Matt said earlier, the current pandemic has exacerbated this issue even further, with cybercrime up significantly across the board. And if you look at 2020, 8 of the top 10 breaches occurred at healthcare facilities. So ransomware is currently one of the largest threats out there, and this is because of the relatively low execution costs, the high rates of return, a lot of organizations are paying the ransom, and minimal risk of discovery. And for this reason, ransomware has become a preferred method of attack for cyber criminals. And you can see there's 4,000 ransomware attacks every day across every industry. And ransomware is a form of malware, and with 230,000 new malware samples produced on the dark web each and every day, we know this is a trend that's only going to accelerate. And I feel that we've reached our tipping point now in the industry with the very recent devastating cyber attack in Germany. And you guys may have heard about this, but it was a ransomware attack that made the hospital's computer systems inoperable. And a patient who was due to have life-saving treatment had to be transferred to another hospital. And en route to that hospital, she unfortunately lost her life. The crime is still being investigated, but it's suspected that hackers took advantage of a known vulnerability in the hospital's VPN system and used that to gain access to the network and infect it with ransomware. But really, the seriousness of the event is that it's the first known fatality at a hospital due to a cyber attack. That we've evolved from a complex cybersecurity environment to what's now a dangerous one. So if you look at what some of the cybersecurity experts recommend, one of the things that they highly recommend is segmentation. And this is because malicious actors love flat networks, because if they can compromise just a single host or a single vulnerability anywhere in the network, the entire network becomes basically a house of cards where the bad actor can laterally move to your most valuable assets. So segmentation is about stopping that lateral movement and containing breaches to where they occurred. So it's really about preventing the damaging propagation of malware, ransomware, and viruses across the network, containing them to just a small area. So rather than, all of the computer systems in an entire hospital being inoperable, it's a small segment of computers impacted, but the business overall is still able to function. And of course, we always need to focus on prevention and building multiple layers of defense into the network, looking at endpoint security, antivirus, anti-malware software, content filtering, firewalls. But because there are no guarantees with security, it's critical to minimize damage if such an attack actually occurs. And the slide says it best. Network segmentation ensures that a breach is an incident, not a catastrophe that really puts you on the headlines. IoT is actually creating creating new urgency around segmentation. So analysts say it takes on average 3 minutes to hack an IoT device, but on average 6 months to discover that breach. And with regards to medical devices, there's been, of course, you guys know, a lot of publicity around vulnerabilities in certain infusion pumps and other medical devices. So to protect both the device as well as the rest of the enterprise network from this threat, it's recommended that groups of IoT devices be isolated in their own segment and apart from the rest of the healthcare network to reduce risk. And segmentation can offer a lot of important things. It can help safeguard information, and it can also help in showing compliance to things like HIPAA, PCI DSS, and even GDPR regulations. It can minimize damage by containing breaches and isolating known vulnerabilities, a medical device running an old operating system, for example. And then protection from insider threats. And this is important because it's estimated 30% of breaches are conducted by individuals inside the organization. And then we've talked about some of the others, preventing the spread of malware, ransomware, isolating and segmenting IoT devices. So even though network segmentation is not new in the industry, it's been a recommended best practice for a number of years, flat networks still persist across our industry. And it's not because people don't understand the value, it's because it can be very difficult to implement. So some of the current ways to segment the network, using VLANs and ACLs, using firewalls, maybe using overlay tunnels, these can be operationally complex, or they can lock the scale that's required when you're looking at this era of IoT and all of these new devices that need to be connected to the network, or they don't really extend end-to-end across the network. You might have a segment within your data center, but extending that through to each and every remote site could be very complicated. So the right fabric can really overcome the shortcomings of these approaches and provide an easy-to-implement, easy-to-manage approach to segmenting the network. So you can isolate different user groups or tenants, you can isolate different locations, different applications, and different IoT devices. So for an example, you might want to have dedicated logical networks for certain tenants. You might want to put like the research department or the biomedical department in a specific isolated network. Patient and guest Wi-Fi services, maybe a cluster of clinics you acquired. And then you might want to have micro segments for things like imaging, patient telemetry, IPTV services, telephony, and so on and so forth. And Extreme's fabric provides the ability to create these multiple logical networks or multiple microsegments very easily over a converged network. And these services or segments are completely isolated from one another and run as ships in the night without any awareness of each other and without allowing any access in or out unless otherwise configured. And of course, as we talked about earlier, these logical networks can be set up very simply with edge provisioning only. Once you have a segmented network, you need to have policy-based control over who and what gets access to those segments. And the key here is to assume zero trust. Zero trust is getting a lot of traction in the industry right now, but what it does is it basically assumes that there are attackers, both intentional and non-intentional, both within and outside the network. So even when authenticated, no single user or machine should automatically be trusted, and access to resources needs to be controlled within the perimeter of the network. So network access control is a key aspect to zero trust, but zero trust is a philosophy and should be built into the end-to-end security architecture. But diving into access control, we know many of your healthcare environments are being hit with this influx of IoT devices. So it could be network-connected medical devices, intelligent lighting systems, IP cameras, door readers. And when it comes to securing these IoT devices, the one thing that is important to consider is that unlike your user base, IoT devices generally have a constrained number of hosts that they communicate with. So you want to lock down that communication where all traffic is denied unless it's to an improved host using an improved traffic flow. So you can see the scenario on the slide. And because our imaging machine is trying to send traffic to our PAC server using DICOM, it's approved and it can pass. But if that imaging machine was trying to talk to another imaging machine, the traffic is blocked and quickly quarantined for further analysis. And then this combination of policy-based control with segmentation gives you a very secure yet simple and automated network environment. You plug in an imaging machine. It's assigned a policy to onboard it to the imaging segment of the network. And then once onboarded, communications within that secure segment are restricted, ensuring only communication to authorized hosts using authorized applications and protocols. The other thing that's important to consider in the current network environment is because most clients and IoT devices are connecting via Wi-Fi, wireless intrusion protection systems should be an important component of a multi-layered defense and detection strategy. So it's a critical tool for not only helping protect your Wi-Fi connected clients and devices, but also getting a detailed view as to what exactly is being transmitted over the air. It's also important, especially for healthcare, that your WIP solutions support BLE or Bluetooth-connected endpoints, as this form of connectivity is widely used and being used more and more for things like medical devices, handheld scanners, smart building deployments, and more. But of course, like other forms of wireless connectivity, Bluetooth is not immune to security threats, and it can be prone to man-in-the-middle attacks, eavesdropping attacks, and others. So Extreme's WIP solution is something called Extreme Air Defense, and it's one of the most comprehensive offers in the industry. It has 230 entries in its threat detection library, which is over 2 times our closest competitor, and it offers 24/7 monitoring of all traffic and can detect and remediate against most threats, of course, nothing is all, as well as rogue devices and endpoints. So we've talked about some of the tools that you can put in place to reduce the potential attack surface and contain breaches if they occur, but what happens if you've already been breached? And many hospitals, as well as other organizations, have already fallen prey to the WannaCry ransomware. And the challenge with ransomware is, of course, it can easily spread from the user domain to the medical device or IoT domain, especially when the network is not properly segmented. So we did work with a European hospital system who had a serious WannaCry infection back in 2019. And a security scan validated that one of their suspicious ultrasound machines was in fact infected with WannaCry and was also trying to infect other vulnerable network-connected imaging devices. So what we did is we applied an IoT security solution at Extreme that we called Defender for IoT. And it's locking down communications in the ways that we talked about earlier. So in this particular scenario, only DICOM traffic and some SNMP traffic was allowed to be sent and received from this infected device. All other traffic was blocked. And what this meant for the hospital system is that their ultrasound machine, which of course you guys know is expensive to replace and can't be patched, is still able to function safely while the infection of the WannaCry remains. But now there's no danger that this infected ultrasound machine will try and infect other imaging devices or even computers at all. Well, it wouldn't infect computers because we're going to have it in an isolated network segment. But there's no chance that it's going to infect other imaging devices within that network segment. So if you've had a ransomware attack and you're not sure whether the infection spread to any network-connected medical devices, Extreme can really work with you to help solve this issue. And I'll pass it back to Matt to talk about all the various ways Extreme is here to help.
Yeah, we want to keep those little green monsters away. Thanks, Camille. So yeah, we are here to help. Just a little bit about our team. Let's see here. So we have 2,000 customers worldwide of Extreme. We're basically 10 to 12% of Extreme's revenues come from healthcare. So thank you. A few of our accounts are listed below, highlighted. But the other thing I like, being in the communication industry for over 20 years, that Extreme actually has a dedicated healthcare account team, not just an overlay support team, but also a dedicated healthcare account team. That's all we do, handle acute care, long-term care, and clinical. So we engage in all those conversations that you're interested in as a director or CIO, and have had part of those experiences along with those folks as well. The other thing I want to note is we have a very strong third-party ecosystem. Like Camille was talking about asset tracking, right? Losing assets. Where's the monitor? Where's the pump at? Where can we find it? Those kind of things. And then obviously we work with Stanley Healthcare and their AeroScout solution. We also work with third-party solutions such as Pointer to kind of help define not only asset but also with COVID. Some of the COVID tracing and things along that nature. And then we obviously work with some of the bigger names in healthcare, such as Philips, Hillrom for Nurse Call, Draeger, Ascom, but also Vocera. And Vocera obviously is very important for Wi-Fi. And one of the things that kind of leads us to is our leadership. Gartner 2019, the last one that was published for LAN, wireless LAN, we moved into the leadership category. And part of it is because of not only of our cloud prowess, but also our high-density Wi-Fi. We do business with the NFL, moving into major leagues, others, arenas, but healthcare, obviously with the high density where we mentioned earlier, patient guest experience is just as important as EMR, and so is Vocera as far as nurse call. And how do I handle that in high-density environments as far as healthcare? And some of the things that we specialize in as far as our infrastructure support, along with, as Camille went through, security and automation from data center to the edge, right? You can now take the network from the data center to the edge, securely automated, uptime at reduced OpEx up to 60%, led us into these categories and also into our peers. I'll kind of come back. We'll circle back with the peer group here in just a second. But here's a quick case study. I already mentioned how it kind of proved out. OSF was one of those. We were approached by them. They were currently using a third party for their LAN infrastructure. They have 13 hospitals, several hundred clinics, and they were looking a way to automate and secure and also reduce some of that spend with their current provider. And I think the quote says it all. The question was how we could refresh our networking gear, achieve a better total cost of ownership, and enhance network operations and security all at the same time. And that's really what was posed of us as I went through the operation 3 years ago, and that's how we ended up with Extreme. So Colin, we worked with Colin over the years. It's a growing relationship. It's been great. We were able to actually expedite the project. When I was saying, it goes back to earlier when I was saying get ahead of the projects, and we were tasked to kind of get ahead of the business. So we were actually able to move up the projects of moving their healthcare systems over to Extreme by 18 months. So we took basically a 3 to 4 year plan and did it in 2 years as far as an organization and moving them to the newest infrastructure. So very successful. We've gotten kudos from others. It was the #1 IT project, which you don't get too much as a networking, right, as far as infrastructure and those things making a game changer. And this kind of says it all. This is from 2019, but it looks like they've been a user since 2015. Nothing better than hearing it from your peers, and they actually use the word game changer. And I've actually had a client who approached me afterwards, and why didn't you tell me, get me on here sooner? It's been able to help us change our environment, secure automation, give visibility, and we are driving this to cloud. They kind of give you that visibility, network informatics, so as you drive your patients, your population health, and other information into the system, we are here to partner with you for success. So I appreciate your time today. Camille, you've been great. And Mark, I will pass it over to you for Q&A time here where we're going head to end.
Matt and Camille, thank you so much. I've learned so much. It's been really great. We have just about 10 minutes, and we're going to try to get to several questions. But first of all, once again, thank you very much. Really appreciate your presentation. So we have several questions. I would like to, I'm just going to pick them out here.
Yeah, no problem, Mark.
Yeah. So can you talk about how you're automating the network? Do you need programmers to do so? Is there an overall controller? Can you explain the mechanics of that briefly?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. And one of the nice things about how we're automating the network is we're really trying to keep things simple. So rather than having an external controller and being reliant on that and needing to program the network switches to take advantage of certain pieces of automation, we're building automation directly into the network protocols themselves. So the idea is, allow the network to take care of networking. Just make it plug and play and as easy and automated as possible inherently within the network protocols.
Yeah, Mark, just to note, we're leveraging industry standards. This is not proprietary, so it's both IEEE and IETF ratified, and there's additional fabric automation on the board with IEEE now. So this is something that's been out there. We ran the Sochi Olympics across. This was the first network that did IPTV at the Olympics and real-time scoring. So that was our big splash event. And then it's obviously culminated into healthcare, manufacturing, energy, enterprise, all different verticals as far as automation and security aspects of it.
Oh, terrific. That's interesting too. In the use case in which you talked about the ultrasound device infected with WannaCry, would the solution that you talked about work with other forms of malware as well?
Well, it's definitely something we would have to explore and validate. And the benefit of the solution I talked about is it has been shown to contain at least the WannaCry infection with the right application of the right profile. So we'd have to look at other specific types of infection and see what profiles could be applied to spread, to prevent its spread and ensure that that infection can be contained. So it's possible, but we just want to look at it in more detail.
Okay, that makes sense. Here's another question. Can Extreme Security Solutions work with my existing infrastructure, meaning non-Extreme networks?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we do have a lot of integrations that we've done with some leading security vendors. So we have a lot of partnerships with some of the firewall vendors, as well as some of the endpoint security vendors. And as well, we do have a lot of our own in-house security solutions as well. Matt, maybe you have something to add to that?
Yeah, Camille, you're spot on. I mean, Mark, we understand that we're not asking you to, hey, you've got to change your infrastructure out to Extreme to get the benefits, but there's many things from air defense, which layers in with your current Wi-Fi infrastructure, to network access control with our clients, to Defender, which can be used with existing infrastructure, and then detail out medical IoT for assets and for security. So there's many, many solutions that we provide, Mark, in the security realm that we work with. And we know it's never easy. As a CIO, obviously security is paramount, and there's always hands-on talk with the security group. Hey, how far does security go, right, Mark? And when does the network take over? So I know I won't call it a battle, but there's always some good, intense conversations ongoing always about security and network in healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very challenging for CIOs. There is complexity there. I appreciate your bringing that up. Here's another good question. How do I get a funding report for my healthcare system? Yeah,
let me go back to that. This is the sample we showed earlier. So you can just reach myself would probably be the easiest way. Let me get this back on the screen. Where is it? Oh, right here. So there's my email. It's a little different. McNeil spelled EE, so it's MMCNEEL@extremenetworks.com, and I can help work with FG. Usually it takes about a day, maybe 48 hours due to schedules, but we can definitely help if you have some interest in the potential funding from FG and Extreme capabilities, and set up a quick conversation if needed.
Wonderful. Another question. Are there additional costs in filing as a consortium?
No, there's not, Mark. So good question. I know there's the consortium, maybe a new term to some as far as the CIO, as far as in an urban setting, but there's actually a little bit more benefits. If you saw, where is it on the slide? It's this one. You can actually open yourself up to, as a consortia, to additional facilities and equipment and engineering monies to be appropriated back into, Mark. So there's actually some benefits by filing through a consortia.
Okay, great.
But no additional cost.
Great. And last question I have here, is it correct that Extreme is offering cloud management for free?
Yes, we do have right now two tiers of our cloud. We have something that's called Connect, which allows you to onboard devices, do some monitoring of your network, and that absolutely is completely free, and it is a good way to really check out the capabilities. And then, of course, we offer another tier called Pilot, which is our paid subscription model, which lets you do more of the advanced configuration functions. You can still do some basic configuration with our free version, but anything more advanced would be a subscription license.
Okay, thank you very much. We're about to conclude. I would like to ask both of you, virtually everything you've shared involves advice, which is wonderful. What advice, looking forward in the next few to 5 years, say 3 to 5 years, would you like to share with CIOs and CTOs about how they think about networks and networking in the very broadest sense over the next few years, so that they're not strategizing too narrowly. In other words, I'm sure there will be surprises, there will be bumps in the road, but I would just like to ask each of you to conclude with advice for the next 2 years. Whoever would like to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first, Mark. I think for us, it's building awareness, and giving an opportunity to have that conversation. In healthcare, like I said, we are unique as far as a dedicated healthcare team. We have dedicated teams to work with third parties for support for certifications, testing, Mark. We're very easy to deal with, is one of the comments I get back, which is a compliment to the team's work attitude and prowess. But, very rarely do you find the communications organizations in the upper tier that do just that, specialized. So I think it's more of that opportunity to engage and to find out and learn more about Extreme, but also our partnerships. And, we're just highlighting one of our partnerships with FG as far as the funding piece as well, but we also work with TCF Bank, financial services. We didn't go into how Extreme's capital solutions can help network financials and then to achieve attainment and success that way as well, Mark. So really that's one of the things I like to think about over the next 3 years, how we're growing and how the cloud is moving, AI/ML, how the network and digital transformation is paramount. I know CIOs are getting pushed by CFOs and their organizations to move faster, and we can help them do that.
Camille?
I think my only advice would really be, just don't underestimate the importance of the network. Digital transformation and digital technology, the IoT devices you're planning to adopt, those all require a solid foundation enabled to work properly. So again, that shift in thinking and not looking at the network as a cost center, but as a strategic asset, I think is really important, especially as we move into the next couple of years.
Absolutely. I think that one of the most interesting elements of this situation right now is that security has never been less secure in U.S. healthcare. We just reported on a massive ransomware attack that attacked one integrated health system with 400 facilities nationwide, and that was revealed yesterday publicly. It's pretty scary out there. Yeah, and so I would urge all listeners to really think about the long-term protection of their networks and the long-term stability of their networks. It's so incredibly important. So, I want to
user training. User training too.
Yes.
That is so important.
Yes, absolutely, Camille. Great point. So, Camille and Matt, thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you both for this excellent webinar, and I want to thank Extreme Networks for making today's program possible. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone in our audience for joining us. We hope you'll join us again in the future for another Healthcare Innovation webinar. This concludes today's presentation. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and thank you again for Healthcare Innovation.